Long before the story of Zara was ever told, there stood a beautiful village surrounded by forests and flowing rivers. Life here moved with the rhythm of the land. At sunrise, the farmers walked to their fields, children played along the red earth roads, and the elders watched over the people beneath the great tree in the village square. It was a peaceful place. A village that believed it understood the mysteries of the world. But sometimes, destiny arrives in ways no one expects. And on one unforgettable night, the fate of this quiet village was about to change forever. As the day slowly unfolded, the village was alive with the sounds of everyday life. Women walked through the courtyards carrying baskets filled with food and firewood. Children chased one another between the huts while laughter echoed through the warm air. To the villagers, this was simply another peaceful day. Yet somewhere within the village, a family was preparing for a moment that would soon become the center of every whisper and every fear. Among the villagers lived a young woman who was expecting a child. Her pregnancy had been a joyful blessing for her family, and many neighbors had shared in her excitement as the day of birth drew closer. But as evening approached that day, the wind began to rise and dark clouds slowly gathered above the village. No one yet knew that the child she carried would soon become the subject of fear, mystery, and destiny. As night approached, the young woman began to feel the first pains of labor inside her small hut. Her husband stayed beside her, trying to calm her as the wind outside grew stronger. The sky rumbled with distant thunder while the village slowly prepared for the coming storm. Inside the hut, the struggle of new life had already begun. Soon the storm arrived with terrifying force. Lightning flashed across the sky and rain poured heavily over the village rooftops. Inside the hut, two elderly midwives worked carefully as the young mother cried out in pain. And in the middle of that powerful storm, a baby girl was finally born. Soon the storm arrived with terrifying force. Lightning flashed across the sky and rain poured heavily over the village rooftops. Inside the hut, two elderly midwives worked carefully as the young mother cried out in pain. And in the middle of that powerful storm, a baby girl was finally born. By the time the storm had passed, the story had already begun to spread. Some villagers whispered that the storm was a warning from the spirits. Others believed the child born that night carried a strange destiny. Under the great meeting tree, women gathered in small groups, sharing their fears in quiet voices. What began as whispers would soon grow into something much more dangerous. Before long, the rumors reached the elders of the village. The chiefs gathered beneath the sacred tree to discuss the matter. They spoke of tradition, of ancient warnings, and of the strange storm that had shaken the land. Fear slowly clouded their judgment. And by the end of their meeting, they made a decision that would change the life of that child forever. That same night, Zara's parents sat quietly inside their hut, holding their newborn daughter close. They had already heard the rumors spreading through the village. They knew the elders were suspicious of the child. Fear filled the small room as the parents whispered urgently to one another, trying to find a way to protect their baby. But the village was already watching. Determined to protect their daughter, Zara's parents made a desperate plan. They spoke about leaving the village before dawn, hoping to hide the child somewhere far away where no one could harm her. The mother held the baby tightly against her chest, unwilling to let anyone take her child. But before they could escape, the elders arrived. The elders and several villagers stood outside the hut with lanterns burning in the darkness. Ignoring the desperate cries of the mother, they forcefully took the baby from her arms. The father tried to protest, but the villagers held him back. The mother fell to the ground in tears, reaching helplessly for the child who was being carried away into the night.
Under the cold moonlight, the villagers walked silently along the narrow path that led toward the river. In the arms of one elder, the tiny baby slept peacefully, unaware of the terrible decision that had been made for her. No one spoke as they approached the riverbank. Only the sound of the flowing water filled the night. Standing beside the river, the villagers hesitated for a moment. Then, with trembling hands, one woman gently placed the baby onto the surface of the water. They believed the river would carry the child away forever. But the river had its own will. Slowly, the baby drifted away with the current. Then something unbelievable happened. Instead of floating downstream, the tiny child began drifting back toward the shore, as if the river itself refused to take her. Fear spread among the villagers as they stepped away from the water. They had witnessed something they could not explain. Deep in the nearby forest lived an old healer who understood the language of nature. That night, she felt a strange pull guiding her toward the river. There, beneath the moonlight, she discovered the baby lying safely by the water. Without hesitation, the healer lifted the child into her arms and carried her into the forest. Years passed quietly beneath the shelter of the forest. Under the guidance of the healer, the child grew into a strong and graceful young woman. Her name was Zara. She learned the healing secrets of the plants, the wisdom of the forest, and the silent language of the river. But the forest still held mysteries waiting for her. One evening, Zara walked deeper into the woods than she ever had before. Strange, glowing lights appeared between the trees, and the air around her felt alive with ancient power. Something had been waiting for her all along. In a quiet clearing near the river, a glowing spirit appeared before Zara. The spirit spoke gently, revealing the truth about the night she was saved. The river had protected her because she had been chosen for something greater. For the first time, Zara understood the reason for her strange life. The river had guided her path since the night she was abandoned. Now it was time for her to return to the village where her story began. When Zara finally walked toward the village again, many years had passed. The villagers looked at her with curiosity, wondering who the mysterious young woman might be. None of them yet realized that she was the child they once feared. Among the crowd stood two people whose hearts began to race. Zara's mother and father slowly stepped forward, staring at the young woman before them. When the truth became clear, the mother ran forward and embraced Zara with tears of joy. After so many years of pain, the family was finally reunited. The villagers watched in silence as the story of the lost child came to light. The same child they had once rejected now stood before them as a grown woman. And the truth of their past actions began to weigh heavily on their hearts. Not long after Zara returned, a strange sickness spread through the village. Many people grew weak and desperate for help. The elders realized there was only one person who might be able to save them. Using the knowledge she had learned in the forest, Zara began preparing healing herbs. She moved from house to house, helping the sick and comforting the frightened. Slowly, the village began to recover. The people who once feared Zara now saw her with different eyes. They realized the child they had abandoned had returned as their greatest protector. The elders gathered once more beneath the great tree, but this time they bowed their heads in humility. They asked for forgiveness for the terrible choice they had made many years ago. Zara listened quietly as the village elders spoke. Though the memories of the past were painful, she understood that fear had once controlled their hearts, and she chose something stronger than anger. She chose peace. As the sun began to set over the village, music and celebration filled the air. The villagers honored Zara not as the child they once feared, but as the woman who saved them. As the river flowed peacefully beside her, Zara looked across the village that had once rejected her. The same river that refused to take her away had guided her destiny all along. Sometimes, the child a village fears the most becomes the one who saves them all. Later that night, when the celebration had ended and the village had grown quiet, Zara walked alone toward the river. The same river where her life had once been nearly taken, yet mysteriously saved. She stood silently by the water, listening to its gentle flow beneath the moonlight. For a moment, memories of that distant night passed through her mind, and with a soft smile, Zara whispered a quiet thank you to the river that had protected her destiny. As the night grew quiet, Zara stood beside the same river that had once saved her life. The water flowed gently under the moonlight, just as it had on the night she was abandoned. But this time, she was no longer the helpless child the village had feared. She had become the woman who saved them all. And as the river continued its endless journey, Zara knew that her destiny had only just begun.